Hey everybody, sorry about that. Some of you guys tried to join the actual proper stream, and YouTube has given me all sorts of good issues this morning. Yay for me. Get to deal with technical difficulties to start out. Wonderful. And that probably means a bunch of you guys dropped off, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and go through and talk about what we're going to talk about today. So one of the big questions that I have is your company actually agile? I know a lot of companies out there actually advertise that they are agile. You'll see it in like job postings and stuff. And boy, once you actually start working there, you realize this isn't really as agile as they claim to be. So we're going to kind of go over that a little bit today. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, ooh, that was not what I wanted to show. Nor is that. What the heck, Steve? That's not the right view. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, is your company actually agile? And I know a lot of you guys, you probably have seen agile. Some of you may not even know what agile is, and that's fine. I'm going to kind of give a quick little synopsis of what agile is. So there was back in was it 2001, I believe it was, there was a meeting and a bunch of industry leaders got together and said, hey, we need to come up with some sort of plan of like how developers should do their development process. Not necessarily the process itself, but just like some core values that we can all agree on that developers should aspire to. And that was how Agile was born. And there were a lot of different individuals there. Some of them are pretty well known. Martin Fowler, Uncle Bob Martin, Kent Beck, all sorts of interesting people that were there. And they came out with the 4 values. And if you go to Agile Manifesto, you can go search this up, and it's everywhere. Individuals and interactions over process and tools. So these are values, right? They're not saying that they're saying that the first part of each statement is more important than the second part of the statement. But that doesn't mean the second part of the statement isn't valuable. So things like individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that makes sense, right? You want to have some level of direct communication between your developers. And this doesn't even necessarily have to apply specifically to developers, right? There's a lot of other processes that can be agile. You just need to replace the product of software with some other product or some other direction or I guess encompassing item. I don't know what you would say, but you can apply it to other things. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Okay, so you want to have every release, you have a working product. All right, and that's sometimes a little bit hard to negotiate, especially because a lot of times there's this demand that you have documentation for everything that's on there. What's more important, releasing a piece of software that is working, or having documentation for everything that you're building, but it doesn't work? Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So this means actually communicating with your customers in a more free-flowing and dynamic nature, rather than having like, here's a strict plan of what we're going to do. Then responding to change over following a plan. So if you are able to respond to any sort of new things that come into the environment, new things that you have to address within the development cycle, then that's good. If you have a plan's okay, but you should be able to have some kind of maneuvering around that plan. Okay, so here's just a few questions that I have to try to help you identify whether or not you're actually agile. And if you're not doing some of these things, you might still mostly be agile, but there's a couple of things in here that I think are pretty hard to identify as your team is not agile. Okay, so the first one is, do you meet daily for 15 minutes but no longer? Okay, just a 15-minute, and this has more to do with Scrum, right? If you're in a Scrum environment, then you're supposed to have just a stand-up daily meeting. I do believe in daily meetings, regardless of whether or not you're following the Scrum or if you're just simply doing a Kanban board but not doing Scrum. you still should have these daily meetings. You should have these continuous face-to-face interactions with each other to talk about what it is that you are doing. Now, with Scrum, it's what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What are some of the hurdles that you might encounter? What are some challenges that you might encounter? And the Scrum Master is supposed to help identify ways of solving that challenge. Again, this kind of underlies the basic principle of the individuals and the interactions, right? The collaborating with your fellow developers. That's important. And doing so on a regular daily basis, not just let's work on this thing and come back together in a month. Like that's not really actually collaborating. That's just meeting. Okay, are you releasing your product once every 4 weeks or less? Okay, I work with students all the time, and when we were doing project phase, it was once every week. They were releasing a product once a week. They were in charge of something for a week. They had to get it done within that week, and then they released it. Okay. I also, like my company, we have a 2-week cycle. Okay. It's just, that's kind of the way that we work. We do it within a 2-week cycle. It can't be more than 4. And really, it shouldn't be 4. It should be less than 4, but 4 is kind of like the max. And if you are releasing your application that every 4 weeks or whatever that time is, you should always make sure that your application is working. It is fully functioning. Now, it may not have all of the bells and whistles that you want in it, right? We're constantly adding more and more features. Heck, it may not even be all that practical of an application, but it works. That's the thing. And once you have something that works, you are providing and adding value. Okay, and that's really, really important, is that every new release of your product is continuing to add value. Are you, the developer, in contact with any of the customers? Do you know any of their names? Or is it just like, I've got a project manager that talks to the customer and then they tell me what the requirements are? Okay, and this is a big one. Like I run into this one. This is one of the reasons why I don't say that Scrum is not agile, but it's not as agile as I think a lot of people say it is, because the developers don't actually get a sense of what the customers want. It goes through a filter. And it also means that the developers don't have any way to give the customer direct feedback. Okay? It's once you encapsulate that communication between the customer and the developer into some sort of job where somebody is acting as this buffer between the customer and the developer, I understand why you're doing it. The problem is now the developer doesn't understand why those requirements are being put in place, because they can't ask the questions of the customer. And the customer doesn't understand some of the technical challenges for some of the things that they might ask. That happens a lot, right? A customer will say, can you do X, Y, Z? And there's this middleman in the middle there. Let me turn that off. There's this middleman in the middle that is basically saying, yes, we can do that. And that's not always the case, right? The developer, then that middleman goes to the developers and says, hey, this is what the customer says. And the developer's like, we can't do that right now. So you need to have, if that person's going to be a middle person, you're going to have a middleman that's talking to the customer, then that person needs to have some extremely good development qualifications. They have to understand the development, maybe even be one of the developers. Okay. And that's like, you're not really going to, having that position means that you are kind of compromising the communication between the developers and the customers directly. And I know a lot of developers would hate me for saying this because they don't want to talk to the customer. They just give me the specs and I'm done with it. I just want to put my hoodie over my head and get to typing, right? That's the kind of attitude that I know a lot of developers have. And the bottom line is, like, you're not going to get very successful with your customers if you are not consistently providing feedback with them. Having that collaboration. It's called customer collaboration. Collaborating with the customer. You, the developer. These values, these principles are set aside for developers, not the team, not for the company, not for the business. These are values for the developers. And number 3 is customer collaboration. You as the developer should be collaborating with the customer. And if there's this middle person that's doing the interpreting for you and on your behalf to the customer, and the customer is going through them in order to tell you what they want, that's not collaborating. That is a process, right? That is a negotiation, if you will. And 9 times out of 10, the developer is going to get screwed in that negotiation because the person that's interacting on behalf is also representing the company. And the company, their management is saying, you need to approve of everything the customer says because the customer's always right. Right? But how often do we run into the customer wanting something completely outrageous and it's like, that what? No, we can't do that. So, all right, enough of that particular topic. Okay, if a new spec is introduced, is it really hard to introduce to your release cycle? Like if a new concept or something has been introduced as a request, how hard is it to go and add that to your process, to your release cycle? Obviously, we don't always want to do it like if we're in mid-cycle, you don't want to introduce it right then and there. But that's, again, one of the reasons why you don't want to have these really long release periods, why you don't, like 4 weeks is really, really pushing it. You should have 3 weeks or less. But if you're on a 1 week release cycle, right? If your time intervals are 1 week for every new release, having that new thing come in is like, oh yeah, we'll just put it in the next sprint. That'll happen next week. We'll do that. Like, right. That would be a very nice answer to have, right? We can do that next week. Whereas if you're saying, well, it's going to be about 6 weeks, maybe 3 months before we're going to be able to address that one, then you're not really responding to change, right? You're not actually responding to the new requests. And what's really important here is that you're trying to build value. You're trying to develop value in the product for the customer. So if they come to you and they say, we need this in our product, and you're basically saying, yeah, it's going to be a while before we can get to that, then that means you're not actually adding the value that the customer really wants. Okay. Is the process of building your product iterative, or is it kind of an all-at-once scenario? So are you building small releases that continuously add value and are working every single release cycle? Or are you waiting to, let's collect all the features, let's not release anything until we've got all of the features done that we want for this cycle and then put it out? If you're doing that second thing, you're not really doing it in the agile way, okay? You should be incrementally deploying updates and fixes to things and hopefully fewer fixes, right? But you're constantly releasing updates that are adding value to the product. And the thing about that is you start to develop a reputation for continuously providing value. And that's not necessarily something that the customer is going to say like, oh boy, every time they release something, they add value. But it's going to get stuck in their mind that every single time that you release something new, oh, this is working. I can reliably expect that this new version is going to be good and working and does something new or adds something to or has some better consistency or something is better about this product. And they may not necessarily, again, articulate that. They just know it because it's happening. Okay. Does every new release increase your product's value? That's a good question. Does every new release increase the value of the product, or does it detract? And this is where I'm going to say Microsoft, how many times are you going to reduce the amount of value of a product? I'm just asking. How many times are you going to give us some sort of feature that we all really, really like, and then a new release comes out and you take it away from us? How annoying is that from the customer side? Okay, this is not something that Microsoft is doing very well. I fully admit, I don't think the Microsoft quite has this one in mind. Now, that being said, I love Microsoft. I love some of the Microsoft products. I love .NET Core. I love the C# language. I love Microsoft Access. I love a lot of stuff. Word is great. Outlook is great. Most of their whole Office suite is fantastic. But there are plenty of times where you'll find a new release with them, and it's like, where did that go? That was really handy. I appreciated that thing. All right, guys, don't forget to take your cups of coffee. All right, sips. I do make good coffee. I'm sure that's a lovely image on the video. Okay. Where are we at here? Doesn't really product value. Do you know? Okay. So do you... Boy, I better learn how to write. Do you know track your feature? Oh, do you track your features? Okay. How can I say this? I wrote this incorrectly, so I got to think of how I want to say this. Do you track your feature development through user stories? So are you kind of keeping track of the perspective of the customer is really what this is about. Are you taking the customer perspective, putting it into some sort of user story, and then making sure that the product lives up to that user story? Okay, like as an administrator, I will be able to blah. Okay, does the product actually do that? And as long as you're doing that, as long as you're keeping track of those user stories and the ideas of what the users want, then you're going to have a much better value delivery, right? Because you know what they want and you're producing a product that measures up to what they want. So those user stories are really, really important. Being able to kind of track what is it that we could provide that would add value for this specific individual, for this particular person, not just the customer, at large, not just if I'm building software for a company, is there a particular person in mind that I have when I'm building this feature? And if you're not kind of mentally picturing that person using your product, trying to utilize that new feature, you're not really doing it right. Okay? If you're just implementing something to implement it, that's not really providing value to any particular person, except maybe yourself. Okay. Do you meet with all of the stakeholders? So all the people who participate. And sometimes, I've seen where groups meet that are the DBAs meet, this group that works on this portion of the application meets, and then this group, so like the back-end developers will meet, and then the front-end developers will meet. But not all three of them at the same time. Not all three of those groups at the same time. Does that really make sense? I guess from a business perspective, if you're just trying to plan meetings, like I just want to plan meetings. I just want to make sure the right people are talking. No. All the stakeholders should be involved. And I run into this even at WazU, honestly. Like we struggle sometimes with the communication, especially because in a remote environment, a lot of us are working remotely. So the communication in the meetings is really kind of, how do you plan these out? How do you talk about them? It's very easy to say, okay, you group, you guys talk in this meeting. And then you guys, you're a different group, you guys talk in that meeting. And you guys in this group, you guys talk in that meeting. And you schedule a bunch of meetings. When's the crossover happen? The only crossover happens when somebody goes to management and management comes back to the others. And then usually it's very demonstrative, right? There needs to be more open communication between all of the stakeholders. Everybody should be talking, okay? Are your conversations with team members face-to-face? Or are they just like written, email, or chat? I understand the place for email and chat, but face-to-face is always better. It always is. And again, like going back to here, I'm in a remote environment. The best conversations that we have is when we're doing video to video, right? Face-to-face. And that's what we do every morning is we have our stand-ups and we are in a face-to-face conversation. I've got my camera on right here. I've got my microphone right here. And so does everybody else in the company. That way we can have this personal conversation. Just like how you guys are watching me right now, I would be able to watch you guys and we could have a conversation. I love that. That's exactly how it should be. You should have a conversation that is face-to-face, not through emails. Okay? All right. Is every release of your product working? Is every release of your product working? I'm just going to let that one hang there. And then finally, are you reflecting regularly on the development practices? So are you spending some time to actually like think about what you guys are doing and analyze the process and the practices that you guys have implemented to say, that's not really a good idea. Or, you know what? I think this is a great idea. We should do it more. Are you guys actually taking that time to reflect on what it is that you're doing? All right, so that's basically it for now as far as those go. Do we have any chats? Any chats? No chats. I got 3 concurrent viewers. Oh, that's great. No, doesn't look like I have any questions. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Sorry about the troubles this morning. I know it was a little bit of a bear having my stream in one location and then getting like completely shifted around to another one. So I apologize to everybody that I lost in that process. Hopefully I can have some of this stuff figured out. It's just YouTube is really goofy. Back on my Programming Made Easy channel, I could use the live broadcast screen to do these broadcasts, and it would give me like the channel ID that I could just enter into OBS Studio, and it would work a treat, no problem. Now it's like that is not there anymore, and I had to go through a completely different process to do the live builds, to do these live broadcasts, and it just completely messed me up this morning. So hopefully you guys did find something interesting about this discussion. Don't forget, every Friday we're going to be doing the Q&A session, so you guys can hop in on Fridays, and we'll have a chat, okay? Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope to see you guys tomorrow.